Winter Hoya care is so different in the winter than the rest of the year. When I first started collecting Hoyas, I was doing all kinds of things. I was moving plants from one side of the house to another. I was repotting. I mean, you name it, I was doing everything. And because of that, my plants suffered a great deal. So what I've learned is that during the winter, it is more about learning to adjust, doing less versus doing more. So in this video, I'm going to share with you what I do versus what I skip during the winter. Why is winter care so different? Winter care is different because we have shorter days, and that means less natural light. Our weather is drier. We turn on our heat, and the temperatures really fluctuate. And all of these changes really do affect how our Hoyas grow. In some situations, they either slow down their growth or slow down completely. And all of that is normal because the environment has changed a little bit for the winter. So I'm going to go through 5 key areas that I focus on as part of my winter care. And those areas are watering, lighting, fertilizing, repotting, and humidity. Number 1, watering. A lot of my plants are in what I call a semi-hydro setup. And what that is the plant is planted inside of an insert pot, which is then placed inside of a cache pot. The cache pot acts as a water reservoir. So what I do, I just pour the water inside of this reservoir, and then through a wick system that touches the water, the plant is able to take up water into its root system. In the winter, I don't water as much, and all I have to do is look at the reservoir and see whether or not the water level has gone down or if that reservoir is completely empty. If it's empty, then I just refill it with water. And that usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks out. That's about the time that it takes for me to refill the reservoir. Now, not all of my plants are in a semi-hydro setup. Some of my plants are in soil. And for those specific plants that I have in soil, I tend to do bottom watering. The way I check to see whether or not those plants need watering, I do the finger test by putting my finger at the top of the soil, about an inch or so down, to see whether or not the topsoil is moist. If it is moist, that means that the plant doesn't need to be watered. However, if it's dry, then I just water it from the bottom, wait about 10 to 15 minutes before discarding the water and placing the plant back. Now, the reason why I do bottom watering is because it avoids fungus gnats. As you know, fungus gnats are basically everywhere, and I try to control their population by doing bottom watering instead of from the top. So as long as the top stays dry, I don't need to worry so much about fungus gnats. That's what I do in terms of watering in the winter. And because I check the soil, because I check the water level in my reservoir, I know I'm not overwatering my plants in the winter. What I do skip, however, in the winter is that I don't water my plants on a schedule. I pay attention to the reservoir and see what the water level is. I do the finger test to make sure that the plants in the soil don't need watering. And the other thing I don't do, as I mentioned, is I don't water from the top on basically either my semi-hydro or my soil plants, just because I'm trying to avoid fungus gnats from hanging out at the topsoil. Number 2, grow lights. Boy, that has been a game changer for me. During the winter, we have shorter days, right? And the light is as minimal as you can think of. Right now it's a cloudy day, so I know my plants are not getting any kind of adequate lighting. So what I have throughout my house are grow lights, and I love the grow lights because what they do, they supplement the natural light that the plants are not able to get during the winter. I have grow lights all over my house in obviously dedicated spaces. I bring all my Hoyas together so they can get the light that they need. I skip putting my Hoyas by the window just because I know they're not getting a lot of grow light. I also skip trying to put the plants in areas where in my house where there may not be enough lighting. Again, I just try to aggregate all of them into one area where they can receive as much light as they can from my grow lights. 3, fertilizing. A lot of my plants are in a semi-hydro setup. Those are usually inorganic substrates that don't come with nutrients. So what happens is that when I water my plants, I add my fertilizer to my water. That's how my plants are able to get the nutrition content that they need. So in that specific setup, I tend to reduce the strength of my fertilizer so that it's not the same strength that I would normally use in the winter. And because the plants are not taking as much water and not as actively growing as they would during the other seasons, what I do, I just dilute the solution so it's not as strong. Every time I water my plants, they're getting their nutrients through the fertilizer. For my plants that are in soil, I do the same thing. Yes, soil has nutrients, but because I already include the fertilizer as part of my watering system, I also water my plants in soil with fertilizer. Again, at the diluted concentration versus what I would normally do in the winter. And what I found out that my plants are doing just fine when I do that. Again, in the winter, they're taking up less water. I don't have to worry about causing any damage because of over fertilization. What do I skip in the winter in terms of fertilization? What I skip is giving my plant the full strength fertilization treatment that I would normally do in the summer. I diluted and cut back on that in the winter. Number 4, humidity. Given that we are in the winter, our air is drier. So one of the things I have around the house are humidifiers. And the humidifiers basically are used to add additional humidity around my plants. So I have a couple of humidifiers in the different areas where my plants are. And what that does, it just helps increase the humidity level to a point that is, I think, acceptable to the plant. I don't overdo it. The other thing I do is I may occasionally mist my leaves, again, just to add a little bit more of humidity on the leaves if I see that the leaves kind of like a little crinkly and they look dry to me. The other thing I do is I bring the plants together, and that kind of creates a microclimate that helps the plant create this environment that is conducive to their growth as they go through the winter season. What are some of the things that I skip? I skip over misting them, and I do that. You want to be careful with that because if you mist it all the time, you may end up creating a problem with fungus or mold. So you want to be careful with how much misting that you do. The other thing that I heard that people do is to put their plants in the bathroom because they think that creates humidity. I don't do that for the simple fact that the temperature in the bathroom tends to fluctuate a lot. You take a shower, there's a lot of humidity. When that goes away, then the bathroom becomes really cold. To me, there's just too much fluctuation that will cause stress to my Hoyas. I don't put them in the bathroom. One thing that I've learned is that the Hoyas will be okay if you don't have ample humidity in your house. Hoyas tend to be adaptable and eventually will adapt to your environment if you give them time. Finally, number 5, repotting. I avoid repotting during the winter unless I know it's an emergency. Unless I have clear signs that my plants are not doing well, then that's when I intervene. Otherwise, I just let it be. A lot of Hoyas may be root bound, and that could be a cause for you to say, okay, well, I want to repot. But I urge you not to repot your plants during the winter because when you're repotting, you're causing stress to the root system. And because it's winter, they don't recover as quickly as they normally would. When I do find that I have a plant that is root bound or the roots are kind of sticking out of the insert pot, I just leave it the way it is. I don't touch it, I don't tamper with it. I just wait until the spring comes around or the summer, and that's when I repot. The other thing that you might be tempted to do is repot because you got yourself a beautiful pot. Again, in that situation, because it's cosmetic, I'll advise not to do that. That's something that can be done in the spring and summer. Now, the exception is because I use a semi-hydro setup in the way that my insert pot, I insert a cash pot, I actually can have a decorative pot that I can use and basically put my insert pot in the decorative pot without affecting or touching the root system of the plant. If your setup is like that, by all means, you can, use your decorative pot. But other than that, unless it's absolutely necessary, I totally try to avoid repotting during the winter. Once you know how to adjust your routine, winter care becomes a lot easier. You might say, well, my Hoya is not growing. What am I doing wrong? Absolutely nothing. In the winter, a lot of Hoyas don't do anything. They're resting, they're dormant. In some cases, Hoyas are known for having no new growth for months, and that is completely normal. You're not doing anything wrong. You might say, my Hoya isn't growing. Is it okay? That is completely normal. Most Hoyas may not have a new growth for months, and that is completely normal. In fact, Hoyas are known to do that. As long as the leaves look firm, the stem is strong, and you can tell that there's really nothing wrong with the plant, so to speak. It just means the plant is resting, so there's really nothing to worry about. You might say, well, what if I made a mistake? And my answer to you is don't panic. Plants are resilient, they'll bounce back. You're learning, and that's what makes a good plant parent. My first winter with Hoya was rough. I mean, I was doing everything. I was moving them, repotting them, adjusting. I was doing everything that I shouldn't be doing. And because of that, a lot of my Hoyas suffered. I lost a few Hoyas because they just weren't looking good. Even succumbed to some root rot and had to throw them away. And with time, I learned that I needed to make the adjustment that we talked about. And because I made those adjustments, I started noticing that my Hoya started thriving and doing better and producing leaves. Yes, your Hoyas do grow in the right conditions and put out new leaves in the winter, and that's possible. The key thing that I learned is that I was willing to make the necessary changes in my care routine in order for the Hoyas to start thriving. And I'm sure you can do this the same way I did. You've got this. Want to know how to check if your Hoya is healthy during the winter? Well, I'm working on the video that talks about the 5 signs to look for. So things like what healthy leaves should look like, how to identify pests, and so much more. Hit subscribe so you don't miss any of that when it comes out. If this was helpful, hit subscribe. I post new Hoya care videos every week. More winter content is coming. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time.